And the guy said, yes, and we're going to shoot one of you every half an hour.
The actual orders for the siege was to rescue the hostages.
We will kill one after 45 minutes, around 29 now. The time is...
Salim, are you still there?
No, we will kill the other.
Look.
From that moment, Abbas Lavazani became a marked man, no doubt about that. And of course, the 6th day he was taken out and he was shot.
Another day at work, but an exciting day at work.
This is a close-up view of the SAS unit fixing their frame grenades to the front of the building.
Standing in line from the top to the exit, and they just threw us from one person to another and took us out.
You're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you become part of what at times feels like a movie.
In January 1979, the ruling Shah of Iran, a close ally of the Western world, fled the capital, Tehran. Mounting pressure from the rising force of Islamic fundamentalism sweeping the country had forced him into exile. By February, a 78-year-old religious leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini, who had been forced into exile by the now-deposed Shah, was back in Iran. The Ayatollah had masterminded the Shah's downfall with the support of most of the Iranian population. His insidious propaganda, which denounced the Shah as the agent of the devil, had found a wide hearing amongst the mass of poor Iranians who had poured onto the streets in their millions to demonstrate. The Shah had no other choice but to go, and the image of Ayatollah Khomeini became infamous throughout the world as the face of radical Islam. The new fanatical Shiite government regarded the United States as Satan and was prepared to breach any international law in the cause of its revolution. The price was paid by the Iranian people. They were arrested and executed in their thousands in a religious reign of terror. There were small pockets of resistance to the new regime, one of which was growing amongst the impoverished Arab minority in an Iranian province close to the Iraqi border, known as Kurdistan. To the Arabs, it was known as Arabistan. Many of their anti-Khomeini supporters had been incarcerated in Iranian prisons in their plight for regional autonomy. Events escalated when months later, Saddam Hussein finally got his hands on the Iraqi presidency. In 1975, Iraq had ceded the eastern half of its Kurdistan border with Iran. Saddam wanted it back, and his agents recruited many of the region's young and naive fanatics to help him. With the emergence of two new radical and opposed power blocs in the Gulf, events moved fast. In September, Iran's Revolutionary Guard seized the American embassy in Tehran, taking 53 diplomats as hostages. Meanwhile, Iran's oil pipelines in the oil-rich region of Kurdistan were sabotaged by agents of Baghdad. But this was not enough for Saddam. He wanted something bigger for the world's press, bigger than the Iranian victory over America and Tehran. He needed a convincing show of leadership for the rest of the Arab world. On March 31, 1980, 6 Arab Iranians, along with Sami Mohammad Ali, an official of the Iraqi ministry, flew from Baghdad to London. In early April, Saddam's stakes were raised when the US Delta Force failed in its attempt to rescue the US hostages in Tehran. The 6 terrorists, traveling under Iraqi passports, had been trained in Iraq for a mission which they had been told would publicize the plight of their fellow Arabs in Iran. They were to seize the Iranian embassy in London and demand the release of 91 political prisoners held in Iranian prisons. On the morning of 30th of April 1980, Sami issued his orders to the group, collected their passports, and then took the next flight back to Baghdad. Armed with 2 submachine guns, 3 pistols, a revolver, and 5 Soviet-made hand grenades, the group were waiting only a few hundred yards from number 16 Princess Gate, the Iranian embassy.
Back in 1980, I was a BBC sound recordist working on a news crew, and I'd been out to Iran and spent 6 weeks there, done the job, come back, and they wanted me to go back in again for another spell. And it was really difficult to get visas to get into Iran for journalists. And really the only way you could do it was to go to the embassy and basically hang around and be a nuisance and almost beg for a visa. And I'd arranged to meet a couple of colleagues down there to get the visa. One of them had gone sick, the cameraman, and ended up with Chris Kramer and I going down there together. And we were waiting in the hallway. There was a sort of oak desk that the receptionist sat at, who was a chap. And we were just sitting in 2 chairs waiting in the hallway, really, on our own, waiting to be called up to see the Dr. Izzati, the press attaché.
Well, in fact, I went there to meet the press officer, whom I met a week earlier. He was lecturing in one of the evening, and he was so impressive. So I thought I'll go and talk to him, maybe in anticipation to travel to Iran. As a journalist at that time, like every other journalist, the main story was Iran. You know, the revolution took place about a year and a bit earlier. And as so many journalists who were working from Europe and working for Middle East newspapers and other media outlets, I was totally involved in the Iranian issue. So it was quite natural for me to travel to Iran. Then I thought it was my chance to go and meet the press attaché, Dr. Izzati. And just 3 minutes after my arrival, in fact, the whole thing's happened. I was late 10 minutes for the appointment to start with, because I was looking for a place to park my car in that area. Had I been late for another 5 minutes, I would have missed the whole fun.
The 6 armed terrorists burst through the embassy doors, forcing PC Trevor Locke with them.
We heard a sort of commotion, and the first thing we saw was Trevor Locke tumbling back out of the road in through an inner door, sort of stumbling backwards, being followed by guys screaming and shouting, and with guns and grenades in their hands. I don't remember them actually firing the guns, but you know, that was how it all started, and they dashed around the embassy, gathering people and telling us to stand against the wall with our hands on the wall and that type of thing. There were 6 of them who followed Trevor in.
I just stepped outside the office and I saw people running up the stairs, screaming, and all in Persian, a language which I don't understand nor speak. So I didn't know what was happening. I just simply followed the crowd. I just ran with them in the direction they were running.
To start with, I just wondered if it was some sort of student stunt. Now it sounds very naive now, because it turned out to be a very serious situation, but it all seemed to have a sort of almost a sort of a comic air to it. But then when I saw what sort of weapons they were carrying and the fact that they had got hand grenades, it all obviously looked far more serious.
I heard somebody shouting in Arabic, giving instructions to the gunman who stormed into our room, not to let the charge d'affaires to escape.
The chargé d'affaires decided to escape by jumping over the first floor balcony. Unfortunately, he wasn't terribly successful at this and landed badly. And when they brought him in, it looked at first sight that they'd beaten him up. But in fact, what had happened was they hadn't actually touched him at all. He just hurt himself jumping from the first floor window.
The armed terrorists had entered the building at 11:26 a.m. They took 26 people hostage. 16 of these were embassy staff. The remaining 10 included journalists, Iranian and Pakistani visitors to the embassy, and PC Trevor Locke, a member of Scotland Yard's diplomatic protection group. A few seconds after the terrorists had entered the building, PC Locke had managed to raise an alarm at New Scotland Yard. Armed DPG officers were immediately deployed to contain the scene. Within 5 minutes of the alarm, the embassy was contained by 2 armed DPG sergeants and 7 armed DPG constables, forming what was to become known as the inner cordon. Residents from nearby buildings were quickly evacuated, and the police cut off all pedestrian movement around the area, and traffic close to Hyde Park, directly opposite the entrance to Princes Gate, was restricted. The outer cordon had been formed, and the Iranian embassy had become, for the time being at least, a fortress.
You lived in number 26.
3 or 4 gentlemen walked up the private roadway towards the embassies or the buildings along there. They bundled into a house about 5 or 6 houses up. The next thing I saw, about 2 minutes after that, was 2 women running out in their early 30s, 35, screaming really, really frighteningly. One with her hand shaking in the air. She ran down the road, and as she was running, 2 policemen on bikes come up from the other entrance and stopped the woman as she was running away, and another policeman grabbed the other one. And then as soon as the police had arrived at that point, another car pulled in at the other end when a plainclothes officer jumped out with a radio, and another officer jumped and said, "Get your head down." And that was immediately when I ducked. The next thing I know was a police officer told me to stay where I was and not to move. And there was two shots that sounded like car backfire, and one was very loud.
Unknown to the terrorists, an alarm had also been raised at Hereford, the headquarters of the 22nd Special Air Service Regiment, the SAS.
The first indication that we had that the Iranian embassy siege was going down was actually in the killing house, where we were practicing room combat and siege busting techniques. All the electronic alerters, which are carried in the pocket at all times, suddenly all went off in unison. We checked the digital readout, and there was a coded message for a live option, the real thing. Suddenly a head came round the door of the range, and we were told to get across to RHQ for a briefing. We were given the sketches of details and told to load the kit. Come on boys, load the gear up. You're going to war in South Kensington. We moved down to the first holding area, Regent's Park Barracks. The immediate action was planned, live ammunition issued, and we all went on standby in case the resident psycho went off medication and started executing hostages. The IA is ultra-violent, based on minimum intel. No time to warm up, going hard, hit them like an express train. Shock and awe, very much who dares wins.
With the group of hostages on the 3rd floor in one room, and one of the people, a lady I think it was, locked the room from inside. And we had another lady with us, staff was working there, was crying all the time because of fear. One of her fellow staff was trying to quieten her down. In fact, he even put his hand on her mouth to keep her quiet, because simply we were hiding somehow. I get the feeling of the whole situation. But 5 minutes later, somebody just fired, shot the door open, and it was one of the gunmen. At that moment, I realized there was a kind of a siege situation.
I think it's shock then comes over you, what the hell's happening. And what you don't want to do is to do anything that might excite them or annoy them or anything else. You just think, keep your head down, don't start any nonsense.
Later on, we were taken down the stairs. That, of course, probably 10-15 minutes later. A time we spent on calming that lady down in the room. She was so weak, pale face, so slim as well, and she kept fainting all the time. So she needed a lot of care. Then she was carried down, almost carried down by a female staff, a friend of hers, and we were taken all to a large room in the ground floor to join some other hostages who were collected from various places inside the building.
They went up and down the embassy, gathering people into a room under threat of gunfire.
Once they sorted out the Iranian staff who were working in the embassy, they were put on one side, and the non-Iranian visitors, if you like, were kept on the other side of the room.
They brought us chairs to sit on. Whilst they made the Iranian hostages sit on the floor at the back of the room, they let us sit on chairs near the door. And at one point, they actually apologised to us for taking us hostage. I don't know whether it was me or someone else said, well, if it's all a big mistake and you didn't want us, can you please let us go? But anyway, they thought to themselves and they said, no, now that we've got you, I think we'll just see what the police do. But you with your BBC and Mr. Locke, Mr. Trevor is, I think I used to call him Mr. Trevor, is police. So we will let you go, but let's see what the police do.
All movement in front of Prince's Gate had been restricted unless it was out of sight of any of the embassy windows. A high brick wall dividing the service road and the main road at the front of the embassy provided excellent cover for movement of the police and anti-terrorist officers from the front of the stronghold. The area at the rear of the premises and the gardens in front of Prince's Gate provided plenty of cover to maintain a watch on the rear windows and entrance to the building. Nearby apartments were used as observation posts and to provide cover for snipers. Forward control, known as Alpha Control, and a base station known as Zulu Control were both established at number 25 Prince's Gate, which was then the Royal School of Needlework. Alpha Control regulated all police movements in and out of the area. Photographic branch established an observation point to cover the front of the building.
At that stage of the game, you've got to be aware that hostages could start to be killed within minutes of arrival. If problems start to occur within the stronghold, you have to go for it, and you have to make the best of the sketchy details that are actually available to you, and it's called the immediate action plan. And within half an hour we could have initiated the IA.
Negotiations were soon opened with the terrorists. The negotiators, with the aid of an interpreter, spoke to the hostages and terrorists through the lower windows of the embassy. Whilst these negotiations were taking place, C7, Scotland Yard's Technical Support Division, began the technical attack on the building. All telephone and radio lines were cut. A field telephone was negotiated into the embassy using a primitive method of a box on the end of a pole. This was the first breakthrough, as it now meant all communication from the terrorists had to come through the police. At 16:30 hours, the negotiators had managed to gain the release of one of the hostages, a young staff secretary who had fallen ill during the opening hours of the siege. By now, the police were ready to make their first announcements to the press who had congregated in their hundreds near to the building.
Anything that looked like a weapon that was wrapped up in cloth or in parcel form of any kind. Anything that they saw suspicious.
Does it appear, from what you've been able to find out, that the hostages are in separate rooms?
In some fashion or other. I don't know just exactly what manner, but they are not all together.
Interviewing the young woman who had been released, the police gained their first real information as to how many terrorists there were and how many hostages had been taken, and were also able to ascertain where in the building they were being held. In the streets nearby to the embassy, Ayatollah supporters had gathered and were beginning to demonstrate. Soon, the demonstration started to build, and there was growing tension as British and Iranian demonstrators came face to face with each other. As the demonstration grew, scuffles and fighting broke out amongst the protesters. The police were not prepared to stop the demonstrations at this point, although they were getting worse, as the noise no doubt caused additional cover of movement by the police around the embassy. Operation Support Group and C7 installed video surveillance cameras around the embassy. These enabled Alpha Control and Zulu Control to maintain a continuous watch on the building throughout.
We started a dialogue with On, particularly Mustafa Karkouti, me, Chris Kramer when he was there, and Trevor Locke. And we became a sort of an internal negotiating team. And Mustafa Karkouti was quite pivotal to all this because he is actually an Arab, and these guys are from the Arab part of Iran. So he had, certainly, and he was a very, very widely experienced journalist, so he did understand their cause, so to speak, and he could discuss Arab politics with the leader, and this was always very helpful.
If you remember at that time, a war was going on between Iran and Iraq, and Iranian Arabs had certainly a lot of grievance against the government as a minority, were under oppression and all sort of things, discrimination also. The leader came into the room, he read a statement, then we told him, why don't you talk to the media outside? Because, 10 hours, maybe 12 hours passed without hearing anything on the news, for example, what was going on. Who the gunmen were, the demands, etc.
Chris Kramer, who was the colleague I was with, he sort of almost offered to, get their message out. And what happened was, before the police could cut all the phone lines off, which is a pretty standard procedure, he actually managed to get a phone call out to the BBC at Bush House. And at that point, they'd actually written out their demands. They had a written version of their demands in English.
Of course, their first demand was the release of about 91 of their comrades in Iran, which was an impossible demand, certainly. At that time, we all realized that. And that increased certainly our fear because, the threat was that in 24 hours, if their comrades are not released, they'll start killing hostages. Then we sort of talk with the leader who came into the room to explain to us the situation, why they separated us and why they were doing this, and their background. He read a statement to us. Then I said, well, look, the main things, have you read this statement to the outside world? us is not enough. What are you doing outside there? He said, it's none of your business. We have our own people doing that. And that night, in fact, they have not been able yet to get themselves organized and control everything. So in the room where we kept, we had everything. We had, for example, telephone line that was still working. Probably about 6, 7 of us managed to make phone calls to their families. I phoned my wife from there, for example, to tell her where I was, and gave her some instruction what to do in case I die, etc. So it was pretty serious stuff.
And they allowed you to do that?
They didn't. They were not aware of us doing that. We did that secretly. The guard was standing at the door, and the phone was in the other corner of the room, behind to some cupboards and drawers. So whoever was using the phone was doing it very, very quietly, while the others were sort of making noise in order not to reveal ourselves. At least 5, including, in fact, the charge d'affaires, he phoned Tehran, and he told them about what was going on. He was, in fact, shut up by the authority there, and he was told, you just stick to your mission, and if you die, we will consider you as martyrs. So there was no way for the government to sort of give in. And of course, that even made us realize how gloomy the situation was and how serious it was.
I'd been a cameraman or a sound recordist on 2 sieges in London before, the Balcombe Street siege and the Spaghetti House siege, and both of which had run about 4 days. So I suppose I got that at the back of my mind. I also knew and assured the terrorists that the British police wouldn't attack as long as no harm was done to us. And there wasn't really any great physical violence at all in the siege with the hostages right from the beginning to the end. And certainly to start with, it was, as far as it could be, relatively cordial.
We remained on standby through the night in case the terrorists' condition deteriorated, in which we would then have to mount the immediate action, which originally entailed driving very fast down to the front of the embassy in Range Rovers, smashing in the front door, the front windows, and rush in there and take on the terrorists in their stronghold. Very much a Wild West show. Unfortunately, if we had tried that, it would have been chaos, because we later found out from intel provided by the caretaker that the windows on the first 2 floors were armoured glass, so the sledgehammers would just have bounced off. So we had to, at a later stage, replan the IA.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, negotiations resumed again this morning, just after 9 o'clock.
On the morning of the 2nd day of the siege, the demonstrations were continuing. Inside the embassy, things were a little confused.
They kept moving us in the embassy up and down between different rooms, allegedly because they were concerned the police were going to attack, and they didn't want them to know where we were. And it was a bit like a barometer, because the more tense they were, the higher up in the embassy they would take us. And there's a room right at the top which was called the telex room, and that's really where we went if it was tense. And then the lower down in the embassy they were, the more relaxed they were. I didn't feel particularly threatened. I didn't feel my life was at risk during the first part of the siege. I was really quite confident that I'd walk out, and even to the point I thought it might be helpful if I offered to arrange a press conference inside the embassy, sort of organise it so that they could, perhaps as part of a deal, make a statement to camera. So I was always thinking of it as having an ending that was going to be relatively happy.
A crisis management team known as COBRA, headed by the Home Secretary William Whitelaw and representing the Cabinet Office briefing rooms, was set up in number 24 Princess Gate, as well as Alpha Control and Zulu Control. The brief was clear. The government would allow the affair to end peacefully with the release of the hostages and the surrender of the hostage takers, but there would be no safe conduct out of the country. The terrorists would either go to a prison cell or a mortuary. Command of C-13 was set up on the first floor of number 24. Their role was to continue the surveillance on the building and build up intelligence on both the embassy and the terrorists inside. They were also going to be responsible for any food that was taken into the embassy with these metal containers, which would later be used to gather forensic evidence. Negotiations with the terrorists continued, and the negotiators were expertly building up a rapport with the gunmen. This, it was hoped, would be used to great effect in trying to persuade the terrorists to surrender peacefully and bring the siege to an end without bloodshed.
And he's got them on the end of a bow. I'll call you back in a moment. I've just got to go and give him a nod now to start walking. Right. You can start moving down now. Will the officer with the set with negotiator 2 acknowledge, please? Negotiator 1, over. Seller. I'll stay on the telephone if I may, just to see if there are any queries arise at the time. What? Just to see if any queries arise or if you have any problems. Okay, right. Good. Salam is awaiting your arrival and he expects you in about 50 seconds, over. Yes, I was telling you that negotiator 2 was now withdrawing back to us with his piece of wood, over. Hello? Hello?
Hello. I want to thank you for the cigarette.
Salim.
The hostages too.
Salim, that's my pleasure. We sent 200 tipped and 200 plain. We didn't know what else to do. Was that all right?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you very much, Dave.
Chris became ill on the morning of the second day. He became very feverish and was sweating and shaking profusely. And there wasn't really anything we could do for him other than sort of keep mopping his brow with a wet flannel. And I then, went to the leader and said, "Look, this guy's really ill. He's got to have medical attention. Otherwise, he's going to die in here." About 11 o'clock, I think, on the second day, they released Chris, and there's pictures of him staggering out. I mean, it was very useful that one of us got out that could tell the police exactly what was going on inside.
He gave some fairly good photo fit descriptions to the police, which were then sent on to us. For example, he described the head terrorist as tall, with an afro type haircut and a small goatee beard. So that was excellent. He was the only guy in there with a goatee beard. So ideal identification point.
Of the 6 terrorists, the leader we called On is sometimes now referred to as Salim. He spoke very good English and he'd been to university in Frankfurt, and he was quite an educated chap, and he spoke, as I say, very good English. His number 2 was conversant in English, and you could just have a sort of stilted, almost holiday conversation with him. But then after that, none of them really spoke English. I always used to put them in terms of there were 2 officers, 2 sergeants and 2 privates in this group. And certainly the sergeants and certainly the privates didn't speak a word of English at all. I mean, a bit of pidgin English. They were only yes, no and hello, goodbye type of thing.
The 6 armed revolutionaries were members of what was known as the Democratic Revolutionary Movement for the Liberation of Arabistan. They were demanding their human and legitimate rights. They demanded freedom, autonomy, and the recognition of the people of Arabistan. Then the threat. If all demands were not met within the deadline, the embassy and all of the hostages would be blown up.
Fawzi was the nice gunman, really. He would often come to us with a smile on his face. He got angry maybe once or twice during the siege. But whenever his shift was on, we would be extremely happy because we wouldn't expect any confrontation between the gunman and the Iranian hostages, at least. But in the background, there's always this little Ali with his hand grenade in his hand, or with the grenade in his hand, often would come, even if it wasn't his shift. He'll just storm into the middle of the building and look with quite big open eyes in the faces of the Iranian hostages, inviting them for trouble, you know. So that was pretty scary. I mean, whenever he showed up, just his mere physical appearance was enough to send fear into our spine, tell the truth. But he just wanted to kill somebody. I mean, you know, it was pretty obvious.
They appeared to be quite well disciplined, if not particularly well trained. Trevor didn't really think that they'd had military training of any significance. I mean, they clearly knew how to handle the weapons, but they didn't come over as highly trained soldiers or anything. They were just a sort of bunch of guys who felt they could further their cause by taking hostages.
Many of the negotiations were relayed by PC Trevor Locke through an open window. Unknown to the terrorists, PC Locke was in fact armed, which Sim Harris was soon to discover.
I kept on to him about taking his jacket off. He'd got one of these thick sort of Gore-Tex jackets. And I said, why don't you take your jacket off? He said, I can't. I said, why not? I said, it's bloody hot in here. He said, I can't, I've got a gun. I said, oh my God. He said, I've still got my pistol. And I actually tried to persuade him because at the time the atmosphere was okay. I said, can't you, I think you should give it to them, Trevor. He said, I couldn't. He said, I'll get the sack. He said, you know, I can't give my gun up. I said, I'm just so frightened if they do find it, what they'll do to you. He said, well, I'll just have to take that risk. He said, I know what you mean. He said, but I can't possibly give my gun up. He said, no, I can't do it.
As negotiations continued in the second day and the first deadline came and went, it was becoming clear to the terrorists that the British government were not able to intervene and secure the release of the prisoners held in Iran. The leader, Salim, changed his demands.
I think they'd been, well, certainly the guys in the lower ranks had been sold a bit of a pop, really. They'd been told they were going to get a fabulous, all expenses paid trip to London. They were going to be have relationships with some very nice ladies. They were going to take hostages, but then they'd be flown home. And the British police wouldn't hurt them, and everything would be fine, and they'd be flown home, and you know, be a great success for the cause.
We managed, when I say we, I mean now 3 of us really, because Chris Kramer has already been out from the first day. It was Trevor Locke, Sim Harris and I. We managed to somehow talk to the leader and his number 2, Faisal, about a possible end of the whole siege itself, peacefully, in view of the fact that the police is not really responding to you, and we doubt if they will. We explained to them the policy of the government of the time, of Margaret Thatcher, how tough she was on security. And we cited two examples to them, which happened in London not long time ago. The Spaghetti House siege in Knightsbridge and the Balcombe Street siege by the IRA. To our shocking surprise, they never heard of these two incidents. Oh my God, how on earth you coming to do an operation, siege operation of this kind, and you have not been briefed about these two major events, which happened just a few months ago, you know? No, they didn't. And we told them about these events, and we explained to them what happened and how they ended. They were shocked when we told them this. So we found here a kind of maybe a weak point in our favor. So the gunmen were extending the deadline.
After 2 p.m. today, all responsibility falls upon the Iranian government. If the Iranian government will acknowledge that they are negotiating with the British government, that will extend the time.
It was a half thought that they would eventually surrender, possibly. There'd been, you know, we'd had good negotiations with PC Locke, who put his head out of the window there, and some of the Iranian members of staff, and they did seem fairly confident that they could bring the siege to a friendly conclusion. And then the other half of you think, well, what happens if they do lose patience, start executing hostages? We got to go for it then. No going back.
Chief Inspector David McNee stated in a press conference that there would be no attack on the embassy, but that neither would the British government capitulate to the terrorist demands.
The gunmen inside the Iranian embassy must know that it is not within our power to meet all of their demands, whatever our views on the rights and wrongs of their cause may be. I appeal to them to remain calm. Hasty action may cause even more suffering to their own people in Iran. I feel deep sympathy for all the hostages in this time of stress, but you will not mind if I have a special thought for Constable Trevor Locke.
Meanwhile, outside the embassy, the demonstrations continued through the night.
Things started to get serious probably late PM on May the 1st. That's Thursday, May the 1st. We were all told to move up by rented Avis vans, move up to a side street just off Prince's Gate, where we debussed and picked our way through the gardens to number 14, which is the building next door to number 16. And we made that our home for the next few days, and this is where we planned the deliberate option and where we would mount the final assault from.
I remember Aoun was telling us, at least on the third day, that that Salim, the leader even, who was supposed to be the most mature among the gunmen, was telling us that he was getting tired and bored because he was briefed that he would do this operation and finish within 24 hours. Now it is third day and nothing happening. So he was getting really hypertense, if you like.
The SAS had ordered a scale model of the embassy to be constructed by technical support. This model, which included a full layout of each of the 50 rooms, enabled the SAS to study all of the entrance and exit points of the building.
We'd planned or the SAS had planned for this type of operation through exercises, simulations, all that kind of stuff. And each squadron rotated through the team over the years, and it was a bit of a relief to actually get down and do the job for real, because training after a while does become tedious. We were totally, the assault troopers, we were totally separate from the police. The only people who had liaison with the police were the senior officers.
In order to gain more knowledge of the building, the SAS also trained with a full-scale model of the building.
We left covertly to do rehearsals, because obviously they laid out mock-ups of each room in the gym at Regent's Park Barracks. So we would leave the number 14 covertly under cover of darkness and go and do rehearsals in the gym. And then we would come back and insert back at number 14 covertly, and nobody was any the wiser.
To gather more intelligence, technical support began to drill holes through the embassy walls in which they could place their microphones or miniature cameras.
I was taken down, I was asked to go with the terrorists, Mr. Sim, you know, and we took down to this wall, and there was a distinct sort of noise, quite faint, but very much there. And I said, "What is this? What is this?" So I said, "Oh," I listened I took it terribly seriously, and I put my ear to the wall, and it stopped, and then it started again. You know, I sort of dragged it out. I knew exactly what it was. It was a hand drill driving through a brick. And I said, I I think it's just mice. And they said, mice? I said, what is mice? I said, little animal. In these old houses, there's lots of them, and they squeak.
And of course, they got agitated. Mustafa, Trevor, we were called by the leader. Coming, we want to talk to the police outside. We were taken to the window straight away. And of course, you can imagine, I mean, the whole atmosphere was tensed again, and God knows what was going to happen. Gunmen walking like mad. They sort of gave instructions to the gunmen: you go upstairs, you go down, you watch that window, as if really the police was about to storm the building. So you can imagine the situation. And we were taken to the windows. It was very, very late in the evening. And so the police came, and we explained what was going on. Well, all what they said that, tell Salim or Aoun, or whatever his name, he used that name in that occasion, what name he used, that, there was nothing to worry about. Okay, he said, we will wait and see. If this noise continues, we'll start killing a hostage. So we went back to the rooms, then the squeaky noise continued. It never stopped.
Day 3 saw the first real threat of the situation worsening and one of the hostages being executed.
We thought one of the hostages was about to die. It was Dr. Izzati, whom I went to see, in fact. He was the press and cultural attaché. Salim got really, really angry that day with the security outside through the windows. We were still allowed to talk to them through the windows, face to face at least. Me and PC Travelog would come to the windows whenever we were asked to do that and talk to the security outside, with the guns, of course, behind our back. That day, of course, as expected, the security were playing their game, wait and see, pressure, this sort of things. The gunmen were demanding a statement to be read on air about the situation inside the embassy and about their cause and all that. The security asked back for a reward, if you like. They didn't want to give it free. And what they wanted was a release of some hostages. Of course, Salim refused that. And the conversation hotted up and it got really almost out of hand. And he went back just a few meters back. He grabbed a hostage. It was Dr. Izzati, and brought him to the window with a gun in his head, showing him physically to the security people outside, if you don't do that, I'm going to start killing him. At that moment, Dr. Izzati fell on the ground with sort of a lot of foaming coming out from his mouth. His eyes went backwards, only black there. His face was so pale. This convulsion when you have it really, really bad. It was a pretty scary scene. We just, went around him, carrying him, trying to do. We didn't know what it was. To start with. It took us about 10-15 minutes to bring him back to life, if you like. So the whole atmosphere was so tense. It was silent for probably about half an hour. Really, you could hear a drop of a pin on the floor. Nobody was saying a word, including the gunman. That was the first serious, tense moment during the series. The serious, we had few one before, not so serious, but that was very, very serious indeed. Because later on, Salim came and apologized from the gunman, though he was Iranian, and he told him we did not mean that. We wanted just to show the police outside that we meant business.
There were still no signs that the terrorist demands were going to be broadcast to the world. As the fourth day of the siege began, it became clear that the Iranian government had no intention of intervening in any way.
Well, I've already told them over the phone. They tried to contact me last night that we concede to no blackmail whatsoever, whether from the superpowers or any country or a small group of terrorists. We stand fast and concede nothing, and that is what we have always said, and that is what we have maintained and will maintain.
Could you tell me some more about that conversation you had with the gunman in the embassy? Because it's widely reported that they made threats to you and you replied with threats to them.
No, there wasn't a threat. Actually, they said we have already sent our demands, and I told them precisely that. And I told them also that if anybody will be harmed in the embassy, then it's going to be the severe repercussion on those whom you want to have their liberations. That is, their crimes will be added to the crimes of those whom they ask their liberation.
I think he will regret for this statement.
Can you go into details? What do you mean he will regret it?
I mean, after the deadline, we will kill everybody here, all the hostages.
The Saturday night was crucial because they wanted a demand made on the radio. They wanted a statement read out on the radio, and the police were using their tactics were delay, and trying to get concessions from the terrorists.
To allow hostages to come onto the pavement outside the embassy.
I told you, we don't want their life to go. We don't want this word, we want just to
The still photographs were taken by the terrorists on a camera which was subsequently found among the debris in the embassy.
لطفاً شما هر پیامی دارید دیکته کنید بعد ترجمه کنم و ایشون بنویسن.
Exactly what I want.
Our message is that we wish to see Tony Clash.
دومی مسئله سفیران رو باید
ببخشید یه دفعه دیگه بگید.
یکی دومی مسئله سفیران اینا سعی نکنن کار
Tony Crown, and could you please catch him now?
Is he prepared to release a hostage after he has seen Tony Brown?
آیا حاضر هستیم بعد از اینکه آقای تونی کراون دیدین یکی از گروگان‌ها را چیز آزاد کنید؟
خیر، ولی اگه جسد دیتونش رو میخواید بعد از چند لحظه تعمین کنید.
No, we're not prepared to free any of the hostages, but if you want to see a dead body of any of the hostages, you may see them in a few minutes.
Sorry, but I did not report back that threat before because it will destroy our argument, and I wish to keep this threat at the moment between ourselves because it will not help me to argue his case.
میگن که این تهدیدی که قبلا هم یه دفعه گفتید اجازه بدید میگه من
نمیخوام بشنوم. این تهدید نیست.
I refuse to listen. بفرمایید.
این تهدید نیست، این خواسته ماست. کاری نکنید که گروگان‌ها را بکنید با اینکه ما دلمون نمیخواد اینو بهش بگید.
یه دفعه دیگه بفرمایید.
بگید کاری نکنید گروگان‌ها را بکنید با اینکه دلمون نمیخواد.
Please don't do something which will cause us kill the hostages because we don't really wish to do so.
We convinced on that it was a good idea to release some hostages because you are getting a big reward for that. You're having your statement read on air by the media, by the BBC, the radio, television. The whole world is listening. The whole world is watching this event. Just imagine millions of people are watching. So at least you come across with your demands, explaining your situation, and at the end they agreed to do it. And the 3 hostages were released that night. One of them was a pregnant woman, and the other one was a Pakistani American who had nothing to do with the embassy. He was simply there by accident.
He was a very odd guy because right from the beginning, or almost the beginning, certainly the morning of the second day, he produced this British Airways ticket and he started to show it to us. And he said, look, he said, this ticket, I have a flight to Karachi on I think it was Karachi, Pakistan anyway. On Saturday, he said, I can't miss my flight. This ticket's only valid for that flight. And I said, well, rather jokingly, you better go and tell the terrorists so they'll release you in time.
He would stand with his ticket in his hand, waving it like this. Well, look, I'm traveling, I'm passing through London. Please let me go. And they'll get them, tense and angry. They'll push him, and of course that would reflect on us all.
3 times a day, do a round of the hostages, and particularly the non-Iranian hostages, with this bloody ticket. And until it became, oh God, here comes Ali with his ticket again. And he'd go off to the terrorists and the same thing. They were obviously getting increasingly fed up with this. Anyway, he must have worn them out because they actually released him in time to get his flight. I don't think he actually caught the one he'd got the ticket for because the police wanted a few words with him, but I think British Airways did fly him back to Pakistan. So, the motto is be persistent with terrorists.
After the release of 2 more hostages, Salim and his gang of terrorists, along with the remaining hostages, awaited the promised broadcast.
It was due to come on air late in the evening, on the news, on the hour, and we were all gathered and taken up to a different room that night, to the 3rd floor, and because there was a television set up there and also a radio set. So we were all tuning in and watching. And just you can imagine everyone, gunmen and hostages, waiting for the clock to tick at the right second for the news to start. It was a big thing for every one of us. And it was at least step towards the end, if you like, on the long way to the end. And the news came and it was read. First of all, there was the news summary and nobody mentioned the statement. And we all felt, oh my God, what's going to happen now? Then, after the summary, it was read in full.
The statement of the group holding the hostages. We demand the 3 ambassadors, Algerian, Jordanian and Iraqi, to start their jobs in negotiating to secure the safety of the hostages and to terminate the whole operation peacefully. We swear to God and to the British people and government that no danger whatsoever would be in...
I can't describe that moment of jubilation, happiness. We all stood on our feet, jumping, dancing, hugging, kissing, gunmen and hostages. There was a common cause, like it was an achievement for everyone inside this embassy.
It was like a party atmosphere because the police went off and got, almost asked what people wanted to eat, and the Iranians came up with all these. They sat down and wrote this sort of carry-out order, and we just said, oh, anything, sausages, steak, anything, and when it arrived, there were these metal heated containers in which it was stored, and I learned afterwards they'd been to a police canteen and got all this English food and chips and things like that for us English, and they'd pulled up in 2 police cars outside an Iranian restaurant not very far from the embassy and just sort of literally burst through the door and said, stop everything, you've got to cook this lot.
This meat and rice and some pickles and lady's finger with meat and some sweet and some green olives and some chili and some spring onion and some radish. This is all this thing I sent it today, 22 person, like this exactly.
And it really, I can't, and we were sitting eating with the terrorists, and everybody thought, well, that's fantastic, this is it, we're on our way out now.
Saturday the 3rd of May, around midnight, 4 of us decided we'd go up onto the roof of number 14, step across and have a good look at the roof of number 16. And of course we found the skylight once we arrived there and took a good look at it, and it looked in poor condition. The wood around the edges was rotting. So what we did, we peeled back the lead, the waterproofing around the edges of the glass pane, and it just peeled back lovely. And we were able to pull out the glass panes, which meant that there we had access to the embassy. So we had the skylight open, and it led into a small bathroom. I was looking down and I could see the bath, the sink to the left, and the door out of the place. So I lowered myself down so that I was on the edge of the bath, and you could say I was actually the first man into the Iranian embassy. So we went back, reported what we found, and we did actually recommend that why don't half a dozen of us go in with silenced weapons. We could drop down into the bathroom, PNG, night goggles, silenced weapons, just take out the leader, the rest would fall like a pack of cards. There was a sharp intake of breath. Silenced weapons on the UK mainland, all smacks of assassinations, no chance. Back to the drawing board.
It was the morning of day 5, Sunday, the 4th of May. Throughout the previous night, amidst the tired celebrations inside the building, the SAS had been assembling the abseiling ropes on the embassy's roof. One of the police team of negotiators, showing signs of strain, had to be replaced. New people were added to the team. Inside the embassy, all appeared calm, and things appeared to be going well for the remaining hostages.
Well, unfortunately, that wasn't to be the case, because there was a sort of a aftermath on the Sunday morning, and the terrorists, for some reason, 1 or 2 of them, started to scrawl slogans on the wall.
They were quite offensive, attacking Al-Khomeini himself, who was for so many Iranians, the majority of the Iranians at the time, a holy man.
Well, this really wound up some of the Iranian hostages, the real zealots, and really got them wound up to such a point that one of them tried to, he just attacked the second in command, attacked him. The guy was carrying a machine gun and everything, but he just went for him. And the hostages wrestled this guy to the floor to try and, just stop this happening, because we could see all this just becoming a bloody bloodbath. And I remember I was on the floor with this bloke, and there's several of us trying to hold him down. And Trevor Locke, the policeman, standing above us, and he was just saying, "Just hit him! Just hit him!"
I hit Abbas al-Fazani on the face. I slapped him on the face, and I told him, "Well, look, you are risking our lives here, you idiot. If you want to die, you go and die outside. If you believe in God and you think you are going to end up as a martyr, you are completely wrong. Because if you kill us all as a result of your action, you will never see paradise, you will go to hell."
That was the turning point in when it all began to get nasty.
I reached a situation, apparently because of my unfortunate involvement, whether with the police outside or inside, between the gunmen and the hostages. I just simply felt physically weak immediately after that incident, all day and in the evening as well. I just was sitting down, very quiet, physically unable to move, tell you the truth, and suffering from fever, cold and hot all the time. And to the extent that my fellow hostages got really worried, Sim Harris and the rest.
They spoke to him in Arabic, and I said, "What do they say?" He said, they're going to let me go.
"We want you to speak to the authority outside about real intention, our intention, and help us to end the situation."
He burst into tears and kissed us all goodbye and all that sort of thing. And as he went out the door and down the stairs, Trevor looked at me and he said, "That's not good news, Sim, is it?" And it wasn't. It was a turning point, really.
It was Monday, the 5th of May. The head terrorist, Salim, was losing patience. It was clear that the waiting game was soon to be over. Cobra met with Sir William Whitelaw once again. He let it be known that the ambassador stage had passed, deadlines had come and gone, and a firm line would be taken during the day. The commanding officer of the SAS advised Cobra that the deliberate action plan now required less than 2 hours' notice to succeed. The only concession made to the terrorists was that a local mullah from Regent's Park Mosque was allowed access to try and calm the situation.
On the Monday morning, the dreadful final day, one of the terrorists came into the room we were in and pointed at Labasani and said, "You want to die? Come on." He stood up, bared his chest, and was seen leaving the room. Trevor and I were then asked to go down to the ground floor, almost following him down, and they started to tie him up to the bottom of the banisters with what looked like electrical flex. And the police were alternating, trying to talk to me and then talk to Trevor, and talk to me and then talk to Trevor. And they were asking us to describe what was happening, and did we think they were going to shoot him? And we were saying, well, it looks very like it, And I remember Trevor saying, "Well, sir, they're tying him up to the banisters, and they've told us they're going to shoot him." And Trevor and I were taken back up the building, and a few minutes later there were 4 shots. I think everybody thought they were going to be the next, or if it's all going to end in a carnage.
Calm down, Salim.
Yeah, we don't calm down.
Calm down.
We will kill one after 45 minutes.
Salim.
20 now. The time.
Salim, are you still there?
Yeah, we will kill the other. Look, we are very sorry. We are very sorry.
Obviously, the tension inside the stronghold was unbearable. Owen was shouting and screaming down the phone, and then eventually he totally snapped. More gunshots were heard around 7 p.m. and the front door of the embassy opened and a body was pushed out. The body of Lavasani was pushed out onto the pavement. That was it. I thought, that's it. Direct action must be taken. That's the ticket to ride.
Abbas Lavasani became a marked man, no doubt about that. And of course, the 6th day he was taken out and he was shot. In fact, the moment I recognized Abbas Lavasani's body, I told my wife, I said, let us wait for the storming. It's going to happen any minute.
And that was, I mean, a major turning point in the whole thing. Obviously, you know, we just sat there in stunned silence and all the chatter stopped. And the whole atmosphere in the embassy changed. And they asked me what the British police would do, and I said, I don't know. I really don't know. I said, I've never lied to you. I don't know what they're going to do now. All bets are off now.
As the world's press waited, control was finally handed over to the SAS.
So, the Colonel took over responsibility of the siege from the police, and we all moved up steadily to the final assault positions and awaited for the code word, London Bridge.
They said they wanted to speak to
the Iranian officials.
The Iranian officials. We certainly left the army.
Shortly after the 3 shots had been fired, about probably half an hour or an hour afterwards, they took Trevor and me down onto one of the balconies, or the inside stairway. I think it was on the first floor, and the field telephone was there. Then this field telephone seemed to move around on a long cable all up and down the embassy, and we spoke to the police.
Hello, Salim. Hello, sir, this is Trevor. Hello, Trevor. He's told me, he's insisted that I come down and speak to you and tell you directly that if anything is done re-attack, all hostages will be killed. All we're trying to organise, Trevor, is the coach and the aircraft and the movement of the Iraqi ambassador. And I'm going to let you speak to the Iraqi ambassador, and I will get him to reassure you that nothing is going to happen. First of all, we will see. You've got to get out of that building. Do you understand? Onto the coach. The coach has got to go to London Airport, okay? And there has got to be a movement of the people from the coach onto the aircraft.
Of course, during this conversation, and they're wanting to talk detail of numbers and all this detail about Trevor driving the coach and how they're going to organise all this.
About 25 seats. About 29. Sorry. About 29 seats. Yes. Now, whereabouts shall we put that coach first? Shall we put it opposite of the door? Well, opposite of the door is a very vague phrase. If you're looking out of the window... After we check it, then you will put it beside the door. Well, let's talk about that then. Okay. Opposite the front door, you're looking straight out over the park. Can you listen to me? We'll just talk about the first movement of the coach up to the front door. Now, if you look out of the window directly ahead of you, there is the park. Now, to the right, there is just the end of the wall, and that is where those gas men were working on the generators, and were working on that gas leak. Okay, I'll phone you after 3 minutes. No, let's talk about this. Yeah, they're asking me. Just 3 minutes, I'll go. I'll come again. Hello, Salim. Salim. We are listening to some suspicious movement. There is no suspicious movement. There's suspicion. Okay. Salim. Just a minute, I'll come back again. I'm going to check. Salim, there is no suspicious movement, Salim. Salim.
We got London Bridge, the code word, we were on our way. At approximately 7:26 p.m, the embassy was rocked by 2 diversionary charges. Our final assault position was in the French windows at the back of number 14. We pushed those open, ran out of number 14, crossed the gardens into number 16, and I looked up and I could see Tom the Fijian. He's one of the abseilers, and he was hooked up about 8 feet from the balcony, clogged up, and his legs were actually swinging into the window where flames were now starting to lick out onto his body. The OC was screaming, "Get in on black!" because we all stopped there. We thought, because originally we were going to blow the door into the library. Couldn't do it because the upblast could have peppered poor old Tom. We had to resort to sledgehammers, so the sledge guy ran forward, smashed the door, and luckily it wasn't barricaded. Luckily the door smashed in, and we all ran in through into what was a library. From there was 8 of us, 2 teams of 4. From there you split up and go for your primary target. My team's primary target was actually the cellars. At this stage of the game, the adrenaline is pulsing through your body, you know, and you feel like Superman. Nothing can stop you. The door to the cellar opened, slung a stun grenade down there. I thought, I ain't running in there. There could be a terrorist stood right at the bottom of the corridor, you know, blow me away. So I just poked the MP5 round the corner and hosed the corridor down. There was nobody down there, so we then made our way back up the cellar steps to the reception area.
Outside the embassy, the police were rapidly taking up their positions. They would be the reception party should any of the terrorists escape.
I just backed myself into a doorway, opened the door, went into a room, went across to the room where I could see a chink of light, opened sort of solid shutters and sort of curtains, all those back, and saw this guy dressed in top to tail a bit like a frogman, with gas mask on and guns everywhere and great big boots. And I mean, my immediate thought, it was the police. I thought, oh God, the police have got themselves kitted out for this. I mean, you're in such a state of panic, you can't believe it. Well, you don't feel you're in panic, but you are. And the guy said to me, he sort of mouthed at me, get down, and pointed down. And then he stepped back, and then there's just an enormous explosion.
This was the first time the SAS had gone into battle on Britain's own doorstep, and the first time it had been seen by the world's media.
And they came, 4 of them came in, they threw in grenades ahead, the smoke grenades and the flashbangs, and they then came in, and the last one through just said, stay there, stay where you are.
You could hear flashbangs going off, you could hear screams, you could hear shouting, you could hear the drum of 9mm MP5s going off. It was just chaos. There was smoke everywhere, there was tear gas which had been pumped into the front of the building, was now swirling down the stairs. It was all gloomy because the terrorists had put blankets up at the window. It was a total war zone.
Here, you can see PC Locke escaping the smoke inside the embassy. You can also clearly see his gun. The look of relief is clearly showing. From outside the building, it was apparent that the flames were starting to intensify.
room went up in flames, and the heat became quite intense. All the curtains began to burn that had been blown off the window, and the place was becoming an inferno. So I crept out onto the balcony. So I thought to myself, I'll get away from the flames and get onto another balcony. I was actually going to go to my right, which happens to be the School of Needlework or something. And I went to do that, and then I heard a voice from below shouting at me to get down and not to move. Don't move, stay down. I shouted at, I'm burning. They said, if you don't stay down, we'll shoot you.
Sim Harris was not going to disobey the command to stay down, but he risked being shot or burnt by the flames.
And then they said, look to your left, look to your left. And there was one of these frogman guys across another balcony to the left of me, and he was calling me over. And that's then when I did what I laughingly call my balcony scene, of climbing over the flagpole and then following this guy, or being shoved by this guy into an office, stepping over one or two bodies, and back into the hallway again where I'd started off, and then being thrown out by the SAS. I mean, they don't sort of ask you to leave ceremonially. It's fairly rough, I have to say.
They came stumbling down the stairs, coughing, spluttering. Their eyes, obviously, the tear gas in their eyes. They couldn't see where they were going, and they were helped along the way and passed out through the library where we had entered. They were then put on the lawn at the back of number 16 and handcuffed, basically, to stop them running around the place hysterically.
As the embassy was being secured, one terrorist had a final surprise in store for the SAS inside the building.
Somebody at the top of the stairs yelled that we think this one's a terrorist, and we looked up and there's this big guy, afro haircut, combat jacket. Yeah, this guy, he looked trouble. And he was running scared. I looked at his hand, and in his hand, one of his hands, I could just see the primer of a Russian assault grenade. I thought, he's got a grenade, he's going to take people with him. But I had the MP5 levelled with the guys, he'd come level with me. But you can't open fire. And there were guys at the bottom of the stairs. I mean, a round could have gone straight through, at this sort of range, straight through the terrorists and possibly hit one of our guys. So what do? Got to disable him. All I could do was bring up the MP5 and I whacked him on the back of the neck with the butt, the MP5. It did the trick. He fell to his knees and rolled down the last few steps into reception. As he hit reception, he was then shot. 3 or 4 magazines emptied into him, just to be sure. If that grenade had gone off in the confined area of the embassy reception, there'd have been a few with serious shrapnel wounds.
As fire engines rushed to the scene and the barriers of the outer cordon were removed, the siege was winding down.
Things started to wind down from this moment in time. We could hear that the gunfire had definitely stopped. There was still quite a bit of shouting and screaming, and of course, unbeknown to us, one of the terrorists, who'd been dressed in civilian clothes that were actually given to him by one of the secretaries, she'd sneaked him out. Obviously, the Stockholm Syndrome, and sneaked him out because she liked him, had a relationship with him over the last few days, and he ended up on the lawn, handcuffed, and amazingly enough, he was put next to Sim Harris.
I looked over and it was one of the terrorists, and I said, he's a terrorist. Are you sure? Yeah, I said, I'm absolutely sure he's one of the terrorists. And there was a group of the girls clustered around him and they were screaming, don't hurt him, don't hurt him. And the guy said, they're saying he's not a terrorist. I said, no, he is a terrorist. I don't care what they're saying, he is a terrorist. And they then picked him up, and the legend goes they were going to take him back into the embassy again, but the police stopped them doing that.
The fire took a firm hold and the building became an inferno, but it was secure and the police could now start to bring out the hostages. They were brought out, wounded first on stretchers. Still, the police were taking no chances. Marksmen were positioned, guns poised, protecting the police and hostages as they were led out. As the fire brigade started to bring the fire under control, a body of one of the terrorists was brought out. As the hostages were led out one by one and taken to the waiting ambulances, their fears were finally over. You can see Sim Harris in the center of the group. The 6-day siege had been dramatically brought to a close. All but one of the terrorists was dead. The other would remain in prison for a long, long time. The Iranian embassy siege at 16 Princes Gate in the heart of London was finished.
It became apparent once we counted the hostages that we'd actually rescued 19. 5 had been released. 1 had been executed, that was Lavasani, and 1 had been murdered in the telex room on the assault, on the final assault.
When I was inside the embassy, I felt sorry for them because they were sent here to be killed. They were simply sacrificed, viciously sacrificed by other authority, in this case, Iraqi intelligence. So I really felt sorry for them, certainly. But now when the siege is finished and 5 of them were killed, one of them, and the 6th is in prison, I don't feel sorry for them. It's a totally different situation. Why, it is hard to explain.
Well, it's an experience that, lives with you for the rest of your life. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you become part of what at times feels like a movie. Just an amazing experience being rescued by the SAS. I probably remember very little about it because it was just so fast and so slick and brilliantly carried out. I was just a bit player in it. But thank goodness we've got people like that who can undertake those sort of missions.
This was the first big spectacular that came to the knowledge of the general public, and it wasn't intended to start with. I know for a fact that smoke generators were intended to be ignited. When the diversionary charges went off, smoke generators should have been ignited so that a blanket of smoke wafted across in front of the gentlemen of the press who were down the end of the street, so blocking off any sensational newsreels. At the 11th hour, word came down that the smoke generators would not be ignited. Basically, Maggie Thatcher, Cobra, they wanted that on the screen. They wanted the world to see what happens when terrorists come to UK. What happens when the gloves come off and the Brits go into action. They wanted that, and they got it.